All right, welcome back, everyone. We're in our third and final session where we're going to return some of the broader themes we've been talking about today to our conceptual framework and navigating movement as a form of self-love and self-expression. So, yeah, who has any thoughts about what we were talking about earlier in the first session and how watching these pieces and speaking together has changed any of your reflections or affirmed any reflections you had from earlier?
A lovely question. I'm going to respond with not necessarily what is immediately my response to that, as much as something that's just been on my mind naturally, where I feel as though what's helped me move through conflict, whether it's the conflict of like not being great at dance right out or, from the get-go, or if it's the conflict of just like everything we're facing in our daily lives, is this idea that it all boils down to love and fear. This idea that anything that's real, anything that matters, anything that's substantial, anything that can further the human race is something that's ultimately based out of love and truth and light and integrity. And anything that gets in our way, anything that's based in anger or sadness or retaliation, all of those things are just symptoms of fear. And fear is ultimately something that isn't necessarily helpful. We can release that fear isn't real. Fear is based in nothingness. Fear is a fear of the unknown, of not knowing what's going to happen next, or assuming that something is going to happen when you don't really know that that's true. And ultimately, I find that in my most unsuccessful dance situations, they're only unsuccessful because I've put these pressures on myself to fulfill a certain expectation of looking a certain way, or of being the best in the class, or getting it right the first rep. And suddenly one of those things don't go as planned. Suddenly my focus, my energy is spent on my fear. And if I could just release that fear, if I could just release those thoughts and make space for me to actually focus on the love inherent in the exercise, the love for myself for attempting this, the love for the others in this space for attempting this with me, the love of all of us united under this one idea for this moment in time. It's just band, so it's not that big of a deal, but also it's a really big deal. It's a really awesome opportunity to be human. And that's why we do this activity, I think, is to feel the extremes of the human condition. There's just so much. There's just so much. I'm pausing here.
Yeah, I mean, and to bounce off of that, creating just or letting go of that inherent need to just be perfect, do it the best that you can. As an educator, when I'm giving a newer concept or maybe a more difficult concept to any of my students, I always open it up to them saying, I don't expect you to get it right away. I want you to feel it. I want you to let go. You're going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. Be okay with being uncomfortable. Give yourself the chance to make mistakes. That's the only way we can learn. So like when I was working with my drumline, I was giving them very free-flowing, body moving stuff that they have not really done before. And they were very small with their emotions, very rigid. And I wanted big, loose. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to give you any feedback on this next across the floor. I just want you to go for it. If you fall, that is okay. I will celebrate it. Just do what the music is telling you to do. And immediately the quality of motion improved significantly because you created that space. Not only as an educator, you created a safe space to just explore and dance, but as a performer, you opened up that mental space you just let go of that need to be perfect, which I know we have a lot, especially in the marching arts, especially competitive marching arts. Yeah, we're working for a score, but that's not the end all be all. You also want to perform well too internally. And letting go of that can help get you to that place.
Yeah, I'm picking up on two themes here is that we have to allow ourselves to inhabit a personal mental space where we can kind of mentally prepare to move. And there's a study about flow and movement and dancing that one of the most significant forms of disruption to dancer flow and focus was not being able to have your pre-dance routine, whether that's stretching or warming up and elongating the body, mentally preparing yourself through yoga. And it makes me think a lot about how in martial arts ensembles, we often prepare by being with each other and being present in a moment together. So thinking about that as you approach a movement class and extending that kind of love to yourself and to the others around you. Another thing is the body is an instrument, just like we practice our instruments and just like we practice thinking about music in a certain way. We practice moving our bodies in new and different ways, making new mistakes and through new mistakes, exploring new levels of achievement and movement through those. So making a lot of expressions and extensions just by conceptualizing of your body as something that you can practice. You can practice being in your body by being mindful in your body and changing the way that you're thinking about inhabiting who you are in that moment. So those are two themes I pulled out from what both of you said.
Yeah, I want to touch on that last theme that you mentioned, essentially about the mindfulness. Like you've been using this term a lot. We haven't really defined what it is, and I feel as though anyone can define it in a myriad of ways. I personally think of it. I think I said it earlier in this talk, was the idea of like, to be mindful is to be present, is to have this sense of loving awareness of everything in your space, of yourself with others. And I feel as though when we think of awareness isn't something that we think about necessarily. It's not something that we do. It's just something that we are or we aren't. We're either aware in this moment or we're not aware. And of course, the degree to which we're aware, it can vary, but like you just are, you aren't. And I think so often, literally, I just said the word think. I feel as though we often use words think and do, like think about this or do this. And really, if we're trying to cultivate a sense of mindfulness, we're trying to cultivate a sense of being. And being is, again, something that you just are, you aren't, literally. And so if you find yourself, I think, floundering or feeling like you're not getting to where you want to go as a dancer, as a mover, I would contend that it's probably because you're so still stuck in the realm of thinking and doing. And to some extent, you do need to think and you do need to do. But if our motivations come only from our thoughts and not from our innate sense of who we are, or innate sense of being present, our innate sense of working with others, then I think ultimately you're going to get in your own way. And so, the three of us were planning this talk. We were talking about, what would be the most important thing to share with you? What would be the most important thing to do with you and demonstrate? And what we ultimately realized is that though we are all very adequate, if not great movers and teachers, that there's enough beautiful pedagogy and technique videos out there for you to intake, but there's not necessarily those resources for advocating for mindfulness or cultivating that sense of being. So I hope that if nothing else, I just hope that this talk, maybe this is a launching off point for you to actually listen to some of those mindfulness experts out there, like Thich Nhat Hanh or Marianne Williamson or oh my gosh, there's so many others. Eckhart Tolle. It's a very existential thing. And I think ultimately we're just trying to cultivate that, because if you can be aware of your own thoughts, you can be aware of how you learn, and you can become your own tech for teaching yourself how to move, essentially.
I adore that. I love that so much. And I think preparing yourself and learning and kind of getting to know yourself in that way is absolutely so essential to how you express through movement. And one thing I learned about myself was that I need to wear different colored socks in a dance class because I have foot confusion. So I will wear one sock with a Pikachu on it and one sock that is normal. And when I'm watching someone demonstrate something in class, whether or not I'm actually better at it because I'm wearing a Pikachu sock, it makes me feel like I have a better grasp of the situation, understanding, watching someone demonstrate a technique and imagining and projecting what my feet and what my socks will look like on that when I am actually moving. So I was actually able to learn a visualization skill because I had to critically think and mindfully reflect on what wasn't working in dance class for me. And really just taking the time to learn and be yourself will fundamentally change the way that you move and at how you exist in the world also, I think.
And I'm going to hop on just like a very small little soapbox. You talked about going through scenarios in your head, coming from a very neurological standpoint, running through literal just mental practice, even small body motions that you can incorporate throughout your whole entire day are scientifically proven to help performance. Like just take your instrument, for example. You don't have to have your mouthpiece to your mouth to get better at a run. You can literally just go through the articulations on your fingers, and then the next time you go to your instrument, it will be better. It's the same thing can happen with dance. You can mentally see what's happening in your mind. You can say, okay, I want to look like this. This is how I think it might feel in my body. And the next time you come to that skill, it might be a little bit easier. You don't need a mirror in front of you to do that. You don't even need a full studio to practice that skill. You could be in your chair, maybe on a break between classes, or walking through your hallway or at the grocery store, and just do something. That's a really easy way to implement dance in your everyday life.
Yeah, I love the idea of just in any moment, just like, for me, it's less about patterns, less about like combinations of movement that I'm rehearsing by myself, and more just like general fundamentals of movement. For example, if I'm ever just standing idly with nothing to do, or it's like if I'm in line or something, I'm constantly evaluating my posture. I'm constantly exploring the range that like my tailbone can make, to figure out, do I have a neutral spine, which is necessary for, great marching technique in any sense, or do I have like my normal spine, which is something I'm trying to, I want to be more aware of my body and to be more intentional with how I express myself. Similarly with the poise of my upper body, similarly the turnout of whether my feet are parallel or turned out, and then turning out based on how my body enjoys turnout, how much it naturally turns out, versus trying to rudimentally force myself to be 45 or 90 degrees. So again, just taking moments and trying to actually be mindful of my body and to become aware of these possibilities that I need to return to.
Absolutely. And in planning this session, like Dan said, we had some really amazing questions emerge. And one was, where does your joy come from? And that knowing the answer to that comes from mindfulness and knowing about yourself and movement, watching and immersing yourself in interpreting movement, not just watching videos of dancers, but looking outside. I'm watching someone shovel snow. That's a form of choreography as, as defined by needing to get the snow out of the driveway. So just expanding the concept of what movement can be. Movement just as you're reaching up to grab a can off of a shelf at home. Movement is all a part of that. We are constantly moving, constantly in a state of choreography, whether that's our daily schedule or where we need to walk to go to class or to work, things like that. So just being present of mind in everything that you do will significantly impact the way you move and how you find your joy through movement.
And to that end, I feel as though, especially if you're still in a situation where you don't get to see many people, where you really are secluded to your own living space, A, relatable, and B, I don't think there's ever been a better opportunity to perhaps explore yoga. I think yoga is kind of like, that is sort of the summation of what we're talking about, where it's equal parts physical and also mental, and also that sense of focus, whether you call that something spiritual, something about beingness, whatever. And because what we traditionally think about yoga is like, it could be a workout, especially like in the West, we think of this as like something that you do to condition yourself, which it literally can do. But what that flow of yoga, those poses that we make, is just one of out of 8 branches of yoga. It's actually like, the purpose of being able to do these shapes is to be able to experience awareness, be mindful of your position, to release your mind of any thoughts, no matter what physical position you could be in, expanding all of your physical possibilities so that your spiritual possibilities can match that. And there's so many great tutorials on YouTube of yoga. There's also so many great websites for studying yoga and the actual tenets of it. For all of these little tools that we have in terms of like coping with the moment, like what are these like little tricks I can do to succeed in dance class? I think ultimately, if you're looking to stop treating the symptoms and to start treating the actual, I don't want to say disease, but the actual like bigger issue, I think for most of us is, again, just getting out of our own way. And so developing that loving awareness of the person shoveling the sidewalk, understanding that that's choreography, understanding that when I get that soup can off the top branch or the top shelf, that I'm experiencing choreography in my body. we're just developing our loving awareness. And you just practice this every moment, every day. And then after a year, maybe you haven't gone to an in-person drum corps rehearsal camp, but you suddenly have, you're able to soak in what you're taught in that moment. I don't know, it's also such good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to touch in on what your very last comment, soaking in what you are being given. That's such a huge part of being a performer. Yeah, there's reciprocating what you were given, but were you actually understanding what was being presented to you? And to do that to the best of your ability comes from opening up that mental space, being ready, being prepared, coming from a place of love and readiness and willingness to, make mistakes, willingness to put yourself out there, and the willingness to practice, to find that space, to be mindful and to do what you need to do to be ready so that you can take it in and find that personal experience.
A willingness to see things differently. I might not understand at this moment, but I'm willing to understand it differently soon. And so again, keeping yourself open and receptive. And to that end, honestly, ask questions. I think sometimes the scariest thing we feel like we're not allowed to do when we feel like we don't have any understanding of anything is to actually ask to slow down, or actually be like, we're on step C right now, but I don't understand step A. I don't even understand what the alphabet is, first and foremost, And sometimes it's like asking those questions that suddenly it's, by asking that, you're only uniting yourself closer with your teacher. And to some extent, your teacher is a performer, is an artist. They want to collaborate with you. And so the more we could be collaborating with each other on a similar level versus inherently viewing the process as like the master and then the peon. Like, you're not the peon and they're not the master. You're all just human beings working together. So go into it lovingly, ask those questions, be curious, not judgmental.
And understand you're not the only one in that position too. Someone else is probably thinking the same things. Someone else is just as lost as you might be and might be a little more scared to ask your questions. You're never alone. Whether you're in a dance class, or you're at your drum corps rehearsal, there are other people experiencing maybe not the same. They may not be perceiving the experience the same, but they're going through an experience just like you are. But you're not alone. It's an individual, like there's the internal processes going on, but it's still shared with those around you. And I think that that's a great thing, because you can open up that space for those around you as well, to make it that much more inviting for someone who may still be a little too scared to explore, someone who may not be comfortable letting go. If you help open that up, you're not only making their experience better, but you're making the ensemble's experience better too.
Yes, absolutely. And this is reminding me of an exercise that I know my 7th Regiment kids will remember. We walk around, and it's called Cityscape, where everyone is walking in a circle, maintaining fluctuating distances between different people, and the conditions of the city are constantly changing. So over the loudspeaker, one of the instructors will say, "It's raining." And there's a kind of difference in experiencing rain when you're just on your own, walking around, and then being told to experience rain. And not only being told to experience rain, but to express to an audience that it is raining, even though they cannot see the rain. And you're drawing on the experiences that you have of having been rained on previously to demonstrate that to the audience. So a dance and a movement thing like that, it stitches together all of these moments in time. And that is your personal expression to the audience. And that's your story to tell to the audience too. So remembering that you as a performer have something uniquely to contribute to everyone who sees you perform is incredibly important to keeping a sustainable relationship to yourself and to how you move. So that's our city exercise.
I love that. I feel like that touches upon something that Kelly mentioned earlier, this idea of like, there's room for you to bring yourself to the prompt, to the exercise, to the material, where essentially in that cityscape exercise, the students are given a stimulus, they're given like a condition to uphold, and they're expected to respond by conveying a sense of rain, let's say. And so between that stimulus and that response is space for you, the performer, to bring your entire self, to elevate that experience, to then provide that authentic response, versus seeing it as like you're given the stimulus, these instructions to follow, and then you just have an emotional reaction. Because oftentimes an emotional reaction can include things not relevant to the exercise. Like, again, the fear of failure, the fear of looking dumb, the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of being seen as wrong, where in reality, you're just trying to express rain and the experience of rain. So how do you bring your full self? How do you trust your instincts and your intuition, all that you are, to be in the rain in that moment? And every exercise is this exercise. Every dance combination you're given is just you being told that it's raining. But instead, this time it's going to be do a PK turn followed by a chaîné. So bring yourself.
All right, we have reached our time for our third session, and we want to thank you all for watching, and I want to thank my guests for all of their insight and experiences. I've learned so much here just speaking with you two, so my eternal gratitude for your wisdom and everything that you brought to this conversation. I really hope that everyone watching gets something out of this. I know I did.